Now that we have our footage imported, let's go ahead and start putting together a simple sequence. First things first, we want to go to our editing panel. Right now we're on our assembly window setup, and to get to editing, we look at the very top and directly next to assembly, just click on editing. Now if yours is set up correctly, you should now see that we have 4 panels on our screen. If for some reason yours doesn't look like this, there's a simple fix to that. At the very top of the page, click on where it says Window, go to Workspaces, and click where it says Reset to Saved Layout. This should reset you to the factory default, unless you've already made your own saved layout, in which case you probably know how to edit your windows anyway. Now each of these different panels serves a purpose. Our lower left-hand one is the same one that we were working with earlier, just a minimized version of it. This is why it's helpful to bring in your clips in assembly mode, because you have that nice big panel to work with, whereas now we're working with a lot less room. We can also expand and shrink these clips with this slider bar right down here. If you bring it up, makes the clips larger, bring it down, makes them smaller. I'm going to leave mine smaller because I know all these clips pretty well at this point. Directly next to this panel is what is called our timeline. This is where we're going to actually start building our sequence. Above it is a preview window, and to the left is actually going to be one of the most important panels that we work with in this entire class. We're going to have an entire video about that to itself. For now, we're just going to focus on the timeline. So first things first, we need to go ahead and bring a clip into our timeline. I'm going to click on this one that says 1_intro. There's a few different ways we can bring it into the timeline, but the main two are to right-click on it and say New Sequence from Clip and place it in there. The other way, and arguably the simpler way, and likely the way you'll use the most, is to just click on your clip and drag it over to the timeline and release. And that'll automatically place your clip within your sequence. Now to play this clip, there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can hit this play button just below the preview window, and it'll start playing it for you, or you can just hit your space bar, and that'll play it as well. Now you may notice down in our timeline we currently have this blue vertical line traveling along our clip. This is called the playhead. Wherever the playhead is where we're currently at in our clip. Now something interesting happened over in our bins where we have all of our footage as soon as I drug that clip in here. You may not have noticed it at first, but we now have what appears to be a 5th clip, and at first glance looks like a duplicate of our 1_intro. If you look down in the lower right hand corner of this clip, you'll see that it has this sort of odd shape in it. All these clips have a shape, but none have one like this. This shape tells us that this clip is our sequence. That's what's actually happening over here. And so if I drug a bunch of different clips into this sequence, say number 2 ocean and number 3 river, all of these changes that I've just made are now saved to this sequence. And so if ever you decide to open up a second project while working or reopen this one, you can quickly find your sequence again in order to keep working on your project. Now speaking of these little icons, let's talk about some of the icons that we're seeing here. Most notably, this one that looks like a little waveform. This waveform is telling us that this clip has linked audio to it. If we look in our sequence, you'll see that there are 2 bars here that came in when I drug my intro in. The top one represents the video. That's this one that's one solid color. The one below it, with all the waveforms, is the audio that's attached to it. So if we see this symbol on a video, it means that it should have audio attached to it. The reason why it's blue on my 1_intro is that it's telling me that these clips are currently being used within my sequence. So I know that 1_intro is in my sequence because I have these 2 blue icons, but the other 3 clips are all gray, which means that they're not currently in my sequence. Now let's say I try dragging in 2_ocean. I see it has audio attached, but when I bring it in, for some reason, I'm only getting the video track. This isn't a glitch, this is actually an intentional function of the program, where it says V1 and A1 just to the left-hand side of all of these locks. What these options are is it's saying whether or not I'm allowed to bring in assets into either my video or audio. Right now, video is turned on, but audio isn't, which is why I'm only getting a video track right now. If I go ahead and just click on where it says A1, I will now get back both my video and audio again. This may seem like an odd function at first, but this will prove to be extremely useful going forward. I'm going to go ahead and drag in this 2_ocean. Now you may notice that when I bring in this clip that says 2_ocean, I'm able to place it over the top of my previous clip. This is because we are able to use what are called tracks. If you're familiar with using Photoshop, then you should be familiar with layers. Tracks work very much like layers do. Whatever video is on the higher track is the one that we're seeing. So when I scroll forward, as soon as I reach the point that says 2_ocean, I'm now seeing the ocean instead. Audio's a little different. The upper audio is not going to overwrite the lower one. Instead, they're just both going to blend together at this point. This sort of layering is going to be very helpful for you whenever you're working on interviews, complicated sequences, or trying to utilize graphics which need to go over the top of images. Now that we have a couple of clips in our timeline, let's talk a little bit about some of these options we have on the left-hand side of our timeline. We've already talked about V1 and 2, so let's keep moving. The first one I want to talk to you about are these little locks. They're pretty self-explanatory. You press a lock, and all of a sudden you can't do anything to that track anymore. I can't move this video clip at all. I unlock it, and I'm able to move it again. The other thing that I want to point out to you is this one that looks like an eyeball. Again, if you're familiar with Photoshop, you should be able to guess what this does. Press the eyeball, and it makes that track invisible. We'll still be able to hear this audio clip, which you can see from the far right-hand side of my screen where I currently have my levels jumping up and down, but we just won't see the video on that track. We will, however, still see the video on every other track, which currently has the eyeball open. Down below this, we have some audio options. If you've ever used Pro Tools, GarageBand, Adobe Audition, you might already be able to guess what these do. Press the M on an individual track, and that whole track will now be muted. If you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that my audio meters are no longer reading any sound here, but they will still read sound on my lower track because it's not muted. If I undo that, and hit this one that has the letter S, this now solos the track, which means that this is now the only track that I can hear. No other audio track can be heard currently. The last thing here is this one that looks like a microphone. This allows us to do a voiceover directly in the program. All you have to do is press the microphone, it'll give you a countdown of 3, 2, 1, and it'll immediately start recording your voiceover using most likely your internal microphone or a microphone that you have plugged into the computer. To stop it, just click off the mic. Now you may notice there are other places to the right-hand side of the lock that say V1 and V2 as well. These are different than the ones that were on the left-hand side. Right now, if I press my up and down arrow keys, you can see that I can quickly jump to the beginning and ends of my clip. But for some reason, it's skipping right past the start of my V2. That's because right now I have the targeting turned off on this. Targeting means that I'm just telling the playhead to pay attention to this track as well. I'm going to go ahead and enable targeting, and now when I press the up and down arrow keys, you can see that it'll also jump to the beginning of my other clip, not just my original intro clip. Now that we've talked about some of the things here, let's go ahead and talk about some of the icons up in the upper left-hand corner of our timeline. The first one I want to point out is this one that looks like a magnet. This is our snapping tool. I'm going to place my playhead right around the 3-second mark. Let's say that I wanted my ocean clip to start right at the playhead here. If I click it and drag it, do you see how it's bouncing directly to the playhead? You can tell that it's attaching straight to it because whenever it touches the playhead, 2 little white arrows show up on the playhead pointing directly at the clip. That's telling me that it's attached. This is because I have snapping on. Snapping's going to make it so that whenever I get close to the playhead or the end of another clip, it's going to want to automatically attach to that. If I turn off snapping, you see it just gently glides right on by. Doesn't matter how close I get to these things, it's not attracted to them anymore, and so it's not going to try attaching to them. Generally speaking, you'll want to leave snapping on, but if you're ever trying to do very detailed edits, you might want to turn it off for those moments. The other icon I want to show you is this one here. This is called linked selection. Have you noticed that the entire time I've been using this, whenever I select a video clip, my audio is automatically selected with it as well. Well, that's where this tool comes in. If you click on linked selection, you can now move your video and your audio independently of one another. This was another tool that will prove to be very helpful going forward. Now you may notice that when you right click, there is an option that says unlink. You can use it if you choose to, and what's nice about this is that it'll unlink an individual clip rather than every single clip in your timeline. However, that unlink is fairly permanent, which means that if you move your video, there's no warning that it's now come unsynced from your audio. And if you're working on something like an interview or a scene where people are talking, that could be very problematic. It's why I prefer using link selection, because when I click that off and move my video or my audio, I get these little red numbers up in the corners that inform me that my video and audio have come out of sync. It's really easy to fix this problem. All you have to do is hover over the red numbers, right-click, and just click one of the options. As you can see on mine, move into sync is my only option. Slip into sync is grayed out. I'm not going to show you what slip into sync does in this video just because these clips don't do a very good job of demonstrating it, but I will show you this later on. For now, just know that both of these options will allow you to resync your video and your audio. The last thing that I want to show you in this section are these numbers right up here. If you remember from our very first video when we were talking about time code versus frames, this is what I was referring to. This up here is time code. This tells us how far along we are in our actual video clip. See right here, I'm at 3 seconds exactly. Move farther forward, I'm at 6 seconds and 29 milliseconds. That's why there's all these numbers. The first ones on the far left are hours, then minutes, then seconds, then milliseconds. And you may have noticed that when I'm hovering over it, there's a little finger with 2 arrows on it. That means that you can click it and scroll it forward gently this way as well. You can also click on it and type in your own numbers. Let's say that I wanted this ocean clip to start at exactly 5 seconds in on my sequence. I just have to type in 5 for the seconds and 00 for the milliseconds, and my playhead will jump directly to that point. Now all I need to do is grab my clip and drag it directly to my playhead. Now it starts at exactly 5 seconds in. In the next video, I'm going to introduce you to the tools that we use in just about all of our editing.